This episode contains discussions of ritual killing of both adults and children, and details of the ancient Maya process of heart excision. If that isn't something you want to hear about, this may be a good episode to skip. Humans are fascinated by gore and violence, but even more so the mysterious and unsolved. Interest in these disturbing and unpleasant subjects is called morbid curiosity, and it has gripped millions of people throughout the ages. I am one of those people. My name is Hallie, and this is the Morbid Curiosity Podcast. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz Luillier, often referred to as just Ruz, was excavating a stone pyramid buried beneath dense jungle foliage. The temple was one of many buildings in an ancient Maya complex in the foothills of Chiapas, Mexico. In the modern Maya language, it was called Lahamanu-ha, meaning big water, as it sits at the confluence of several rivers. However, it is better known by the name the Spanish gave it when they were conquering Mesoamerica. They called it Palenque, meaning fortification. In the 15th century, Father Pedro Lorenzo de la Nada of Spain stumbled upon the magnificent stone temples and plazas hidden in the deep rainforest. The grand stone structures had once been decorated with blue and red painted stucco, but the city had lay abandoned for hundreds of years before Father de la Nada had found it. No one living knew its Maya name. The Spanish returned to Palenque in 1773, 1784, and 1786 during military expeditions. Soldiers broke open many walls searching for treasure. They found neither silver nor gold. Palenque's treasure was in the information it held. Information that wouldn't be unlocked until the mid-1900s and still isn't fully known today. Palenque is home to some of the finest architecture, sculptures, frescoes, and carvings the Maya produced, all of which are key to understanding their culture and civilization. Most valuable are the inscriptions, hundreds of carved glyphs throughout the complex. This large amount of Maya script gives archaeologists the opportunity to unlock mysteries of the Maya dynasties, their belief systems, and culture through translating their texts. The ruins of Palenque date from about 226 BCE to about 800 CE. At its peak, Palenque supported no more than 6,220 people, making it a medium-sized Maya city. This estimate could change, as only 10% of Palenque has been uncovered so far. Most of the buildings date to the Maya Late Classic period. Most of what remains is the central area of Palenque, the administrative and religious area of the city. The Temple of Inscriptions is one of the largest and best preserved structures. The palace is one of the most complex Maya architectural structures discovered to date. It has a huge central courtyard, galleries with vaulted ceilings, and a square 4-story tower. This was a royal residence and court and was richly decorated before the city was abandoned. Palenque also had a hydraulic water system, enabling water to reach the upper levels of the palace. After its decline, Palenque was overgrown with cedar, mahogany, and sapodilla trees, and these are what Alberto Ruz was clearing away as he cleared the structure at the top of the Temple of Inscriptions. This pyramid is called the Temple of the Inscriptions because of the extensive number of well-preserved glyphs affixed to the temple walls in stucco or carved into the lintels. They chronicle a detailed history of Palenque's golden age, but little about its downfall. From the inscriptions, archaeologists were able to put together the first timeline of the Maya city's rulers. One of these rulers seemed very important, as his name was referenced by many later rulers, and most of the center of Palenque was built during his reign. His name was Ki'inich Hanab Pakal I. Pakal was Ajah, or Lord of Palenque, for 68 years, from 615 to 683 CE, and was responsible for rebuilding Palenque after it was attacked by the neighboring city-state of Calakmul. According to the inscriptions in the temple and other temples as well, the Renaissance of Palenque's art and architecture, also called the Golden Age of Palenque, was during his reign. The text also mentioned that not one, but 2 women ruled as Ajah of Palenque. One of them was Pakal's mother. Female rulers are unheard of anywhere else in the Maya world. Jumping back to 1952, inside the small structure at the top of the Temple of Inscriptions, Roos uncovered a peculiar set of holes in the central stone floor slab of the room. Exploring further, he found that there was an empty space below the slab. His team carefully pulled the slab up from the floor, revealing a secret staircase. However, the staircase and passageway beyond it were filled with rubble, seemingly on purpose. Roos and his team meticulously cleared the stairway and vaulted passageway, which traveled down into the heart of the pyramid. At the end, they found a massive triangular stone door. When they were finally able to inch it open, they discovered a vaulted chamber with a massive carved stone sarcophagus. The monolithic stone box and its carved stone lid filled nearly the whole chamber. Lifting the massive lid revealed the heavily disintegrated but richly furnished grave, complete with a jade death mask, rings on every finger, bracelets, necklaces, and a coating of brilliant red pigment. According to the inscriptions along the sides of the sarcophagus, the carvings on the lid, and the reliefs on the walls, Roos and his team had found the tomb of Pakal. This discovery is one of the greatest archaeological finds ever made in the Americas and the most elaborate and specialized Maya funerary structure excavated to date. In front of the stone door of Pakal's funerary chamber, Roos and his team encountered a sealed stone container made up of the north and east walls of the corridor, the external face of the immense triangular door, and a 36-centimeter tall stone slab. A lid had originally sealed the container, but it had collapsed at some point after the corridor was filled in. It was 1.4 meters wide and 1 meter long. Inside were the deteriorated skeletal remains of about 5, possibly 6 humans. The skeleton of Pakal was highly deteriorated, mostly due to high temperature and humidity that's common in the area. However, it wasn't disturbed since the tomb was sealed, which preserved the archaeological context and protected it from looters for hundreds of years. The skeleton lay in an extended position, with the hands resting on the upper thighs. The head was to the north, and the feet faced the doorway. The skull was still face up at the time of discovery, which is unusual, as normally it would have rolled to the side. It's likely it stayed in place due to the heavy jade funerary mask and the pectoral and neck ornaments Pakal had worn. The pelvis also stayed in anatomical position, probably due to some sort of tight garment worn about them. The bones with intact surfaces had turned brownish-black, except for the pelvis, which was yellowish. Many bones had suffered cracks and erosion, so that much of the cortical or outer layer of bone was destroyed. A compact layer of red pigment covered the whole body. This layer varies in thickness, with the trunk of the body having the thickest layer. This pigment is made from powdered cinnabar, a form of mercury ore. Beneath this red layer are other layers of a carbon-based substance. These alternating layers of red and black may indicate some form of embalming. The death mask had neither substance on it, so it must have been placed after the body was coated. Body decomposition occurred within the sarcophagus, as indicated by a horizontal line on the inside marking the extent of the liquid produced by decay. This also indicates that Pakal's body was never moved from his sarcophagus, and that he remained sealed inside from the time of his death until the discovery of his tomb. Osteological analysis confirmed that the skeleton belonged to an adult male over the age of 55. He was between 161 and 163 centimeters tall during life, which is slightly above average when compared to other male skeletons from the area and time frame. There were no signs of trauma, and overall the skeleton appeared quite healthy, which is also above average for skeletons from Palenque. The skull had been artificially elongated, probably using some sort of compression device that prevented it from growing normally during early life. This process of artificial cranial deformation was not uncommon among the Maya, who purposefully changed their skull shape as a signifier of elite status. Another indicator of high status for the Maya was filed teeth. Pakal's upper frontal incisors and left lateral incisor have been filed to produce a Mayan solar glyph. The death mask's teeth also have this feature. As for age-related skeletal changes, Pakal's lower jaw was missing teeth and had shriveled in size for this reason. There was some tooth decay present as well. Osteoporotic changes, or thinning and brittleness, were present in the axial skeleton, meaning the bones in the middle of the body, such as the sternum, ribs, hips, and spine. This is a general indicator of old age. The vertebral bodies of the spine showed lipping, which indicates arthritis. However, as the legs lacked any arthritic changes, this suggests Pakal lived a pretty sedentary lifestyle. Pakal's skeleton has continued to degrade since its discovery, as the tomb is no longer sealed, which exposes it to insects, bats, fluctuating temperatures, and tourist activity. The bones have also been moved for analysis, and some were unable to be returned to their original positions. The massive stone lid of Pakal's sarcophagus is one of the most recognizable Mayan artifacts due to its beautiful and unique carvings. The stone is 3 by 2.1 meters, and 4 car jacks were required to lift it. The central element of the carving on the lid is a representation of Pakal himself, dressed as the maize god, facing east as he emerges from the maw of the earth monster, a representation of the underworld in the form of a fleshless serpent or centipede. Above and behind him sits the world tree, and around it is celestial imagery. Some interpret Pakal's position as falling into the jaws of the monster, not rising out of them. Others suggest he is dancing out of them, as dancing was a metaphor for rebirth for the late classic Maya. The entire carving and elements of the treatment of the body exemplifies the Maya ideology of the cycle of life and death. This cycle was central to Maya thought and was represented by the setting and rising of the sun, the seasonal cycle of the crops, and the cycle of human birth and death. The path of the sun especially defined the basic structure of the cosmos and the Maya cycle of life. The sun, life, began in the east and ended in the west. The cycle peaked in the north, or the sky. As the sun set, it appeared to go down into the depths of the earth, or south. It is then reborn the next morning in the east. This vertical circuit of eastern horizon, sky, western horizon, earth, as well as the 4 cardinal directions, are the basic foundations of all Maya ritual. East was the beginning of the cycle, birth and rebirth. It was associated with the color red, masculinity, and youthfulness. North was also associated with masculinity, virility, heat, and the color white. The west was feminine, elderly, and black. South was feminine, cold, and yellow. North and south were connected by a vertical cosmic axis that was personified by a tree with a face in its trunk, a representation of a god known only as Si. The Maya believed the life cycle was only half completed at death. Rebirth was the end and the beginning. The colors in Pakal's tomb follow the theme of rebirth as well. Black and red, layered on the body, are symbolic of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Only 2 sets of sarcophagi exist for the Maya, and they're only found in the late Classic period among Western city-states. The general burial type of these polities was burial beneath the floor or patio of the home, or adjacent to the home. For non-elite people, these were simple inhumation burials, sometimes lined with stones and including minimal grave goods. More elaborate burials were placed in block-walled crypts, usually not more than 3 to 4 layers of stone in height and capped with a series of small slabs. Elite tombs were larger versions of this, usually with an internal height of 1 meter and a vaulted roof. In Palenque, temple rooms were converted into royal crypts by sealing doors and burying the building with later constructions. Pakal's tomb is also important because there are so many high-quality grave offerings that weren't moved from their original positions. It's hard to say anything about Maya ideology using burials without any grave goods. The fact that elite burials had so many goods, while poor burials didn't, suggests that the lower classes weren't destined for the same afterlife. However, the idea of rebirth followed an agricultural model as well, indicating that an afterlife may have been accessible to all, but not the same one as elites. I'm going to go over the details, but first, an ad must play. If these ads annoy you, you can get ad-free episodes by becoming a patron at the lowest tier, $2 a month, by visiting bit.ly/morbidpatron. That's bit.ly/morbidpatron. On the other side of the spectrum from Pakal's grand sarcophagus, and literally on the other side of the door from him, is the container full of skeletons. Who were these 5 to 6 people, and why were they packed so tightly into a container in Pakal's tomb? Analysis of these skeletons has been quite difficult due to both deterioration and the quicklime coating. On top of this, all the bones are covered in heavy calcite deposits due to dripping water from the roof forming calcite stalagmites all over the tomb. This coating blocks much of the evidence for cultural marks, cause of death, and post-mortem body treatment. The quicklime preserved the anatomical position of many of the skeletons, helping to determine how many individuals are present, but they are packed tightly together, causing a lot of issues telling them apart. It appears that there are 3 adults. One is probably female, one is probably male, and the other is indeterminate. There is also an infant of about 3 years old and a subadult possibly around 15 years old. Some researchers think the bones must have been defleshed before placing them in the container, as fleshed individuals wouldn't likely fit into that space. Or perhaps they were not all put in the box at once, leaving time for skeletonization between interments. However, thanks to the quicklime, we can see that the bodies were manipulated into positions that forcibly fit them into the space, suggesting they were fleshed and interred all at once. If they had been added separately, older bodies would have been rearranged to fit new ones, and this is not the case. A cut mark was found on one adult vertebra, but it's unknown to which adult it belonged. The vertebra is a lower thoracic one, meaning one with a rib attachment near the bottom of the rib cage. The cut mark is on the front of the vertebral body, meaning to make it, a sharp implement had to come through the abdomen or chest. There were also signs of fire exposure on a few of the bones, but nothing suggesting cremation. There were also a few spots of red pigment. There are many ideas about what these remains represent, and most experts believe they were a sacrificial offering, given some time after Pakal's tomb was sealed. Human sacrifice and ritual killing among the Maya is well documented historically, archaeologically, and iconographically. Ritual killing played an important role in extreme religious expression, allowing for direct communication with and petitioning of the cosmic life-sustaining forces, destruction and offering of a life for life-giving rain or other necessities. Maya victims were not restricted by age, sex, or social standing. There is some tendency toward male children and adolescents as victims, but they were often recruited from the fringes of society, for example slaves, war captives, foreigners, orphans, and social outcasts, while the killers were of the social elite class and usually a religious authority. Ritual killing was a formalized process that had to be done step by step to ensure its effectiveness. Heart excision, or the removal of the heart while it was still beating, and decapitation were common methods of ritual killing among the Maya. Blood was seen as the essence of life, therefore the method had to produce a lot of blood. Witnesses often also participated in bloodletting during the sacrificial event. Destruction of the victim's body through mutilation, dismemberment, or burning was also sometimes part of the ritual, as it too symbolized life. Sometimes the extinguished body was thrown down dry wells, cenotes, or placed in caves without ceremony. I went into more details about this in a previous patron-only episode about Mayan ritual killing. Sacrifice of attendants, also called exegy sacrifice, is like ritual killing, but not exactly the same. This type of sacrifice is not considered communication with the gods, but does communicate to other humans that compared to the person being honored, other lives are trivial. Attendants of the deceased elite are sacrificed, and the purpose is usually to either aid the deceased on the path to a good afterlife or to venerate or worship them. So what reason were these 5 to 6 people sacrificed and placed in front of Pakal's tomb? One way to make an educated guess is by studying another monumental tomb in Palenque. Northwest and directly next to the Temple of the Inscriptions, or Pakal's tomb, is another step temple, much smaller in size. Early archaeologists named it Temple 13, being that it was the 13th temple that they counted when mapping Palenque. In 1994, young archaeologist Fanny Lopez Jimenez was performing stabilization work in one of the collapsed sections and found a small crack on the stairs. Using a flashlight and mirror, she discovered a narrow passage with a sealed door at the end. She immediately notified team leader Arnaldo Gonzalez Cruz of the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico. The door revealed a gallery with 3 chambers, the middle one being another large tomb with a stone sarcophagus, smaller than Pakal's and undecorated, but still rich in grave goods. Inside was another fragmentary skeleton, more deteriorated than Pakal, as the sarcophagus wasn't sealed in the same way. The whole interior was coated in cinnabar, which is why the individual is nicknamed the Red Queen. The skeleton belonged to a 40 to 45-year-old female and lay face up in an extended position with the hands down by the pelvis. Her grave goods included jade and pearl objects and a jade death mask and jade diadem. The skull also shows cranial deformation, and the teeth are filed. Cruz and other archaeologists theorize that this is Ish Zakbu Ajah, the wife of Pakal. There are no inscriptions in the tomb, and no DNA survived well enough to be tested, so this can't be confirmed. Next to the stone sarcophagus on the west side was a badly preserved skeleton of a male adolescent with cranial deformation, roughly 11 years old and lying face up. On the east side of the sarcophagus was another skeleton, a female between 30 to 35 years old, lying face down with its arms behind its back. Both skeletons showed signs of peri-mortem violence. Cut marks were apparent on the child's upper thoracic vertebrae, indicating a violent impact in the neck from behind. This impact likely also created another mark on the inner mandible, which suggests the head was down. It's not known if this impact was the cause of death or a post-mortem treatment. The adult female had various cut and stab marks on the ribs along the vertebral column and several thoracic vertebrae. The 11th thoracic vertebrae, that's the second to last one with a rib, was hit by several profound strokes that nearly severed it into pieces. Deep, multi-directional cut marks were also found on the 10th and 3rd thoracic vertebrae. This collection of cut marks may be an example of ritual violence in the form of heart excision. The removal of the still beating heart of a sacrificial victim as part of religious rituals was considered by the Maya to be supreme nourishment for the divine forces, allowing the ultimate communication with the sacred. Heart excision has been documented for the post-classic Maya and colonial Maya, but much less is known about earlier eras. While decapitation was the preferred method during the classic Maya period, it's assumed heart excision was also used. In a large survey of Maya burials found in ritual contexts, the procedure used for heart excision usually began under the ribs. This method leaves less skeletal evidence of violence as it bypasses the need to cut through the ribs. The procedure has been deduced using cadavers and obsidian knives and axes by a team of archaeologists and forensic scientists led by Vera Teisler and Andrea Kusina. The victim was likely overextended on an altar so that the border of their lower rib cage was exposed. This position is common in Maya iconography of ritual violence. The victim was then sliced or chopped along the lower rib line. The upper torso was pushed over the edge of the altar, opening the chest cavity and exposing the lungs and heart. The heart was then pulled out with one hand while the anchoring tissues were severed with the other. This would take roughly 8 to 10 minutes per victim. This procedure left cut marks on the internal surfaces of the ribs and vertebrae. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish these marks from post-mortem damage. This is why the pattern of marks must be examined as a whole. Generally, different marks are made during different procedures. Defleshing tools and procedures are very different from organ removal tools and procedures. Mayan iconographic representations of heart excision and body destruction are used to support the theory that the pattern we've discussed represents heart excision. Because of this, archaeologists hypothesize that these two individuals in the Red Queen's tomb were sacrificial victims. This is based on the lack of their own grave goods, their placement around an elite burial, and the manner of their placement, roughly fitted into the reduced space against the walls. It's unknown if they were placed there at the same time as the Red Queen or after, but the tomb was definitely sealed just after they were placed. Both Pakal and the Red Queen had lavish tombs, and both had what appear to be attendant sacrifices buried with them. While the elites were carefully placed, arranged, and decorated with many prestige items, the attendants were violently killed and carelessly deposited without grave goods. The stark contrast is brutal. These people had been transformed into ritual objects, used as tribute or perhaps as part of veneration rituals of the semi-divine rulers of Palenque. After the ancient city was destroyed in the 9th century CE, it was abandoned. The temples and palaces of Palenque were entombed by the surrounding jungle, protecting them from looters, colonial forces, and early antiquarians. Its rediscovery at a time when archaeologists are able to glean so much information from what is left is extremely fortuitous. Still, archaeologists can only make educated guesses about the information they uncover. The pattern must be examined as a whole, and there is still so much to uncover in Palenque, which is why Palenque and the tombs of Pakal and the Red Queen ignite the sparks of morbid curiosity. The Morbid Curiosity podcast is produced by H. Lloyd. If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a morbid topic, you can do so on Facebook and Instagram at Morbid Curiosity Podcast, on Twitter at Morbid Podcast, and on our website, www.morbidcuriositypodcast.com. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends and on social media. And please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. This helps the MCP reach new listeners and expand this wonderfully creepy community. Thank you to everyone who has already done so. Because of you, the listeners, our creepy community is growing strong. The MCP has joined the Straight Up Strange podcast network, which hosts true crime, paranormal, history, science, folklore, and other enigmatic podcasts. Nothing is off limits when you enter the world of Straight Up Strange. The MCP is also part of the Belfry Podcast Network, a haven for goth culture, featuring podcasts, blogs, and videos, all catering to the darker side of life. If you'd like to support the MCP, you can give one-time donations on our website. Also on our website are links to all our social media, a list of episodes, and our mailing address. We also have an Amazon wishlist at bit.ly/morbidwishlist. That's bit.ly/morbidwishlist. Any purchases from this list are greatly appreciated. We are eternally grateful for your support. My name is Hallie, and until next time, thanks for listening.